The dense jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, its thick canopy of twisted vines and towering trees blocking out the sun, casting the ground below in a dark, humid gloom. The air was thick with the sounds of alien wildlife strange. Distant roars echoed through the underbrush, accompanied by the rustling of creatures unseen but ever present. This planet, known to the galactic database as Zalorn 7, was notorious for its hostile environment, filled with aggressive predators that had evolved over millennia to become perfect hunters. The alien scouting team had been briefed on the dangers, but with their advanced cloaking devices, they felt confident that no threat could touch them. The team consisted of 6 members from the Corvian species, a highly intelligent race known for their reliance on technology. Their pale blue skin shimmered under the faint light that broke through the canopy, and their sleek, metallic armor glinted as they moved silently through the jungle. Each Corvian had a personal cloaking device attached to their suits, a piece of equipment they believed made them practically invincible. The cloaking devices, developed by their advanced civilization, could render them invisible to both visual detection and most forms of radar, making them the perfect tools for stealth missions. Leading the team was Commander Velar, a seasoned Corvian officer with years of experience in reconnaissance missions. He moved with the calculated precision of someone who had seen countless dangerous situations and survived them all. Behind him were 5 other Corvian soldiers, each highly trained and relying on their technology as a shield against the natural dangers of the universe. And at the rear of the group was Lieutenant Marcus, the lone human in the team. Marcus had been assigned to the mission as a survival expert, though his presence was largely symbolic. The Corvians trusted their technology far more than any primitive survival skills a human could offer. To them, humans were resourceful but lacked the sophistication of species like their own, whose dependence on technology made them feel superior. They believed that no natural environment could best their advancements, and as such, Marcus's inclusion in the team felt like an unnecessary precaution. The mission was simple in theory: infiltrate Zalorn 7, scout out the territory of a hostile alien species known as the Kralix, gather intelligence, and report back without being detected. The Kralix were a warlike race that had recently begun expanding their influence in this region of space, and the Corvians needed to assess their strength and numbers. The jungle of Zalorn 7 was a perfect hiding spot for the Kralix forward outposts, and the Corvians had chosen this location specifically for its dense cover and treacherous terrain. As they made their way deeper into the jungle, the Corvians activated their cloaking devices, and each member of the team vanished from sight, blending seamlessly with the environment. The only indication that they were even there was the faint distortion in the air when they moved. Marcus, however, did not have a cloaking device. He wore a standard-issue survival suit, designed for harsh environments, but it offered no advanced stealth capabilities. Instead, he relied on his knowledge of terrain and survival tactics, something he had honed over years of working in unforgiving environments across various planets. Velar's voice crackled over the team's communication system. "We're approaching the Kralik outpost. Stay sharp and follow protocol. No unnecessary risks. We are in and out without a trace." The team acknowledged the order, their movements silent and swift. They moved like ghosts through the underbrush, invisible to any creature that might be watching. Marcus followed at a distance, his eyes scanning the surroundings, alert to the subtleties of the jungle's ecosystem. He could feel the tension in the air, a kind of pressure that weighed down on them as the deeper sounds of the jungle began to grow louder, more ominous. Suddenly, a sharp beeping noise filled the comms, followed by an abrupt silence. The team froze, instinctively looking at their wrists where the cloaking devices were controlled. The lights on their devices, once a steady green, now blinked red. Marcus heard the slight shift in their breathing, the Corvians too disciplined to speak but clearly alarmed. The cloaking devices were failing. Velar's voice broke the silence. "What's going on? Why are the cloaking systems down?" One of the team members, a technician named Rylus, spoke up. "I'm checking now. There's some kind of interference. It's coming from the environment. The magnetic field on this planet is stronger than we anticipated. It's disrupting the devices. Velar swore under his breath. How long to fix it? Rylus hesitated. I don't know if I can fix it, sir. The field is fluctuating. Even if we manage to reset the devices, the interference could cause them to fail again at any moment. Marcus, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. We need to keep moving. This jungle is full of predators, and we're more exposed now than ever. If the cloaking devices are down, we're vulnerable. Velar glanced at Marcus, his expression hard to read through the visor of his helmet. He wasn't used to taking advice from a human, but he knew Marcus was right. The jungle was already dangerous, and without their cloaking technology, they had lost their biggest advantage. Keep moving, Velar ordered. Stay close and stay quiet. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. The team continued forward, but the tension was palpable. Without their cloaking devices, they felt exposed in the jungle's depths, surrounded by the unknown. The distant roars of predators seemed closer now, the rustling of leaves and the snapping of branches growing louder in their ears. Each sound was a reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond their line of sight. Minutes passed, and the team made slow progress, their pace cautious. Marcus kept to the rear, his senses heightened. He had spent enough time in hostile environments to recognize the signs of an approaching predator. The jungle's rhythm had changed. What was once a cacophony of life was now punctuated by moments of eerie silence. Then, without warning, a guttural growl echoed through the trees, closer than any of them had anticipated. The team froze again, weapons raised, scanning their surroundings. Marcus narrowed his eyes, listening intently. The growl wasn't just a random noise. It was a warning, a territorial display from one of the jungle's apex predators. There, Marcus whispered, pointing toward a thick cluster of bushes to their left. Something's watching us. Velar signaled for the team to move, their weapons trained on the direction Marcus had indicated. They advanced slowly, the tension growing with each step. But as they approached the bushes, the growl came again, this time from the opposite side. The team spun around, realizing too late that they were surrounded. From the shadows of the jungle emerged a pack of Zalornian hunters, massive quadrupedal beasts covered in thick, spiked armor. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and their long, sharp teeth were bared in a menacing snarl. The pack leader, larger than the rest, stepped forward, growling deep in its throat as it sized up the Corvians. We're outnumbered, one of the soldiers muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Velar gritted his teeth. Hold your ground. Don't provoke them. If we fire, we'll alert the Kralliks to our position. The Corvians stood firm, their weapons aimed but unfired, hoping the beasts would lose interest. But the hunters weren't backing down. They circled slowly, their movements predatory, waiting for the right moment to strike. Marcus, still at the rear, took a deep breath. He knew they couldn't fight their way out of this. The predators were too strong, too fast, and even if they managed to fend them off, the noise would draw attention to their position. They needed another way. Stay still, Marcus said, his voice low but commanding. Don't move. Don't run. I've seen these creatures before. They're territorial, but they won't attack if we don't threaten them. The Corvians hesitated, unsure whether to trust Marcus's advice. They were trained soldiers, not survivalists. Their instincts told them to fight or flee, not to stand motionless in front of a pack of predators. But they had no other options. Marcus slowly crouched down, picking up a handful of dirt and rubbing it across his suit. He motioned for the Corvians to do the same, using the natural elements of the jungle to mask their scent and blend into the environment. The Corvians exchanged uncertain glances but followed his lead, covering themselves in mud and leaves, just as Marcus had done. The hunters, still circling, seemed momentarily confused. Their growls softened and their movements slowed. They sniffed the air, sensing something had changed. The Corvians, once bright and visible in their sleek armor, were now camouflaged, hidden in plain sight. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. But eventually, the pack leader let out a low growl and turned away, leading its pack back into the shadows of the jungle. The threat had passed for now. Marcus stood up slowly, wiping the mud from his hands. We're not out of this yet. But if we keep moving quietly and blend in with the environment, we might just make it out alive. Velar, still gripping his weapon tightly, nodded. For the first time, he began to see the value in the humans' approach. Technology had failed them, but survival instincts had not. And in this jungle, instinct might be the only thing keeping them alive. The team moved forward again, but this time they followed Marcus's lead. The jungle was eerily quiet as the alien team moved forward, each step deliberate, every movement calculated to avoid making noise. Marcus led the way now, his experience in survival tactics pushing him to the forefront of the group. The once confident Corvians, who had relied so heavily on their technology, followed cautiously, their sleek armor now camouflaged with layers of mud and leaves, blending them into the dark, dense undergrowth. Commander Velar walked just behind Marcus, his hand gripping his weapon tightly, ready to fire at the first sign of danger. Despite his years of military service, this situation was unlike any he had ever faced. Their technology had failed them, and now they were forced to rely on primitive survival skills, a concept that was entirely foreign to his kind. In the Corvian military, technology was everything. It dictated their strategies, ensured their safety, and determined their success. But here, on this hostile planet, all their advancements had crumbled under the unpredictable forces of nature. Marcus, on the other hand, moved with a calm, almost instinctual awareness of his surroundings. He had been on planets like Zalorn 7 before, hostile, untamed worlds where the laws of survival were more about knowing the environment than relying on advanced gadgets. He glanced over his shoulder at the Corvian soldiers, noticing their stiff postures, the uncertainty in their movements. They were out of their element. As they trekked deeper into the jungle, Marcus kept his senses heightened, his eyes scanning the trees and underbrush for signs of danger. He had learned long ago that the jungle was a living entity, constantly shifting and adapting. The predators here were more than just animals, they were part of the ecosystem, perfectly in tune with their environment. And right now, the Corvians were outsiders, a disruption in the delicate balance of this world. The team approached a steep incline, the ground uneven and covered in thick, knotted roots. Marcus signaled for the group to halt. He crouched low, examining the terrain ahead. His eyes narrowed as he noticed something unusual: tracks, large, clawed imprints in the mud, partially hidden by the dense foliage. Whatever had made them was nearby, and from the depth and size of the tracks, it was large. Very large. Velar crouched beside him, following his gaze. "What is it?" he asked, his voice a hushed whisper over the comms. Marcus pointed to the tracks. "Something big. Probably one of the apex predators on this planet. We need to move carefully." The Corvian commander frowned. "We can take it down if necessary." Marcus shook his head, not without drawing attention. "We're close to the Kralik outpost. If we engage, we'll alert them to our presence. We need to avoid contact with the wildlife as much as possible." Velar nodded, though Marcus could sense the hesitation in him. The Corvian way was to confront threats head-on, to use their superior firepower and technology to overpower any enemy. But this was not a battlefield where brute strength or technological dominance would win the day. This was a game of survival, and in this game, stealth and adaptation were the key to staying alive. They moved forward slowly, skirting around the tracks, making sure not to disturb the area. The incline became steeper, and the ground beneath their feet turned slick with moisture, making every step treacherous. Marcus moved with the precision of someone who had walked countless miles in environments like this. His footsteps were light, almost imperceptible, as he navigated the terrain. Behind him, the Corvians struggled to keep pace. Their armor, though designed for mobility, was not built for such rugged terrain. More than once, a soldier slipped, barely catching themselves before tumbling down the slope. Marcus didn't say anything, but he knew they were growing frustrated. They were warriors, accustomed to fighting battles in space, on technologically advanced worlds. Here, in the jungle, they were as vulnerable as anyone. As they reached the top of the incline, the jungle opened up slightly, revealing a small clearing. Marcus motioned for the team to stop and crouch low. In the center of the clearing, a massive tree with twisted roots dominated the landscape, its trunk wide enough to hide several people behind it. Marcus scanned the area, looking for any signs of danger. Suddenly, his eyes caught movement in the distance. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but years of experience had trained him to notice even the slightest disturbances in the environment. He raised his hand, signaling the team to remain still. The Corvians froze, their weapons ready, but their postures tense. Through the thick underbrush, Marcus saw a Krallic scout. The creature moved with a kind of fluid grace, its dark, leathery skin blending into the shadows of the jungle. It was humanoid in shape but taller and more muscular than a human, with elongated limbs and a face that was both reptilian and insectoid. Its eyes, a deep, glowing red, scanned the surroundings, looking for any signs of intruders. Marcus cursed under his breath. They were too close to the Krallic outpost. The scout must have been patrolling the perimeter, searching for any signs of threats. If they were spotted, the mission would be compromised. Velar, who had also noticed the scout, whispered over the comms, "Should we engage?" Marcus shook his head. "No. We can't afford to give away our position. We need to let it pass." The Corvians, still unused to the idea of not engaging a potential enemy, shifted uncomfortably, but they obeyed Marcus's command. They watched as the Krallic scout moved closer, its keen eyes scanning the area with practiced precision. Marcus pressed himself against the ground, his body blending into the mud and foliage. He had taught the Corvians how to do the same, though their movements were still less fluid than his. They followed his lead, their armor now camouflaged enough to avoid immediate detection. The Krallic scout paused for a moment, its red eyes focusing on the clearing. Marcus held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He had faced worse odds before, but something about the Krallics always made him uneasy. They were cunning, far more intelligent than most of the enemies he had encountered. If this scout found any trace of them, the entire mission would be at risk. For what felt like an eternity, the Krallic scout stood motionless, its head tilting slightly as it listened to the sounds of the jungle. Then, after a few tense moments, it moved on, disappearing into the underbrush, heading further away from the Corvian team. Marcus let out a slow, controlled breath. "We're clear. Let's move." The team rose from their positions, moving quickly but quietly through the clearing. Marcus led them toward the massive tree, using its roots and the surrounding foliage to stay hidden. They were close to the Krallic outpost now, too close to risk any mistakes. As they moved, Velar caught up to Marcus, his voice a low whisper. "You've done this before, haven't you? Surviving in places like this without relying on technology." Marcus nodded. "Many times. Technology is useful, but it's not everything. Sometimes, knowing how to use the environment is more valuable than any gadget." Velar seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding in agreement. "It's not the Corvian way, but I can see its value here." They continued moving, the Krallic outpost now visible through the trees. It was a rudimentary structure, built into the jungle itself, with organic materials blended with advanced technology. Krallics were known for their ability to adapt to any environment, and their outpost here was a testament to that adaptability. It was nearly invisible, hidden among the trees, with only the faintest signs of technological infrastructure. Marcus crouched low, scanning the outpost with a pair of binoculars. "There it is. We need to gather as much intel as we can without being detected." Velar gave a series of hand signals to his team, instructing them to fan out and begin gathering data on the Krallic forces. The Corvians, despite their earlier discomfort, moved with precision and discipline, spreading out in the jungle and using their now camouflage suits to remain hidden. Marcus stayed near the edge of the clearing, keeping an eye on the surrounding jungle. He knew that the Krallics wouldn't leave their outpost undefended. There would be more scouts, possibly even traps. The Corvians were good, but they were still at a disadvantage in this environment. As the team worked, Marcus's thoughts drifted back to his years of survival training. He had always been fascinated by the ways in which different species adapted to their environments. Humans, though technologically advanced in their own right, had always been forced to rely on their instincts and resourcefulness in situations where technology failed. And here, on Zalorn 7, that resourcefulness was proving to be their greatest asset. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the jungle, a snapping branch, followed by the unmistakable growl of a Krallic scout. Marcus's heart raced as he turned toward the sound, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. One of the Corvian soldiers had tripped, crashing into a pile of underbrush. The noise had drawn the attention of the nearby Krallic scouts, and they were closing in fast. Velar cursed, signaling his team to retreat. "Fall back, we've been compromised." The jungle erupted into chaos as the Krallic scouts burst through the trees, their red eyes glowing with predatory intent. The Corvians fired their weapons, but the thick jungle foliage made it difficult to aim, and the Krallics were too fast. Marcus grabbed Velar's arm. "This way. We need to split up and confuse them. Follow me." Without waiting for a response, Marcus dashed into the jungle, weaving through the trees with practiced ease. Velar and a few of his soldiers followed, while the others broke off in different directions, hoping to divide the Krallic forces. The jungle became a blur of movement and noise. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he led the Corvians through the dense undergrowth, dodging vines and leaping over fallen logs. Behind them, the Krallic scouts were gaining ground, their guttural growls echoing through the trees. "We're not going to outrun them," Velar shouted over the comms, his voice strained with exertion. "We don't have to," Marcus replied. "We just need to lose them in the jungle. Follow my lead." He veered off the main path, leading the group into a narrow ravine filled with thick, tangled vines. The Krallics, larger and less agile, struggled to follow. Marcus pushed through the vines, using the dense foliage to slow their pursuers. The Corvians, though less familiar with this kind of terrain, followed his lead, their movements growing more confident as they trusted Marcus's instincts. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the Krallic scouts began to fade. Marcus signaled for the group to stop and crouch low in the underbrush. They were hidden once again, the jungle concealing them from their enemies. Velar, breathing heavily, looked at Marcus with newfound respect. "You just saved our lives." Marcus shrugged, his eyes scanning the jungle for any signs of movement. "Just doing what I know." The Corvian commander nodded. Perhaps there's more to survival than technology after all. As the jungle fell back into its eerie silence, the team knew they had survived for now. But the mission was far from over, and Zalorn 7 had many more dangers waiting for them. Yet for the first time, the Corvians understood the value of human instincts and adaptability. In the hostile heart of the jungle, it wasn't the cloaking devices or advanced weaponry that had saved them, it was the raw, primal knowledge of survival.